gamers, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 13, The Lucky 13 of Ropi Gamma. I am your GM, Byron, and of course with me is my co-host, Howard.
Greetings.
And, first and foremost, we gotta kind of apologize a bit. Obviously, we've been away for 2 weeks. I put up notice about the first week, because that was kind of planned. The last week was kind of impromptu. And I feel we've got to apologize. But however, I must say at least this. It was gaming related as to why we weren't here last week. I had to put out some brush fires with the Epic game. From everyone, actually. And with talking with everyone and help from Liz, help from Howard, help from Miri and Puff and Matt and Allison, all of them, really. I think I've saved the game, and I'm starting to get it back on a good course. So, but on the other side, yeah, that's personal, selfish reasons. Sorry we weren't here last week. Yeah, we apologize, or I apologize at the least. So, but we're back. So yay.
It was good though. I mean, the discussions, everything, it actually bore pretty ripe fruit. It was a very good discussion. And yes, I mean, let's just talk about what we've been doing in gaming. Let's talk about the Epic game. And for once, I'll start off with the Epic game.
Okay.
First of all, it is tough with a large group, and online is even tougher. I should know. I do this on a regular basis, especially with Shinetar. And you brought together a bunch of really good players, but you also brought together, at least as far as I'm on my part, and I don't know about the other ones, a number of people who had never met before, and that's always rough because if you don't really have a basis to know how they're going to mesh.
Yeah.
And without being able to see each other, without having that first couple games in person, or at least having sort of a meet and greet where they all sort of get comfortable with each other, yeah, it's tough.
It was a bit of a gamble, I'll admit. However, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You all are some of the best players I've ever played with. So I was banking on that helping smooth things over. And for the most part, it did, but some rough spots started showing.
But again, I mean, you had so many things stacked against you, and I think you've done a very good job of keeping in the road. And I will say that the fact of communication, people have communicated with you, and again, communication is the key. And you have been willing to take.
I had to almost pull teeth to get some people communicating, but.
But it has worked. It has worked, and if the last game, we'll see how it goes tonight. But if the last game was any indication, a lot of the sort of the stilted role playing, the uncomfortableness, because people feel more comfortable with talking about what they enjoyed and what they didn't enjoy. That's the key.
Yeah, because
so many players won't talk about that. Yeah,
and it's one of the reasons why with good, bads, and uglies, I always stress. I feel there can always be a bad, because I feel there is always room for improvement. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I've actually been told that I intimidate some people sometimes when it comes to gaming, just because of how good I am. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. This is their words, So I think some people are just like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to make other people upset. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to make Byron upset. Even though I'm sitting there begging, I was like, make me upset. It's like, I know I can do better. Freaking tell me something.
I've had people not want to sort of let me down. They're like,
yeah.
You've been playing so long, you know what you're doing. I'm afraid I'm a beginner. I don't know. I'm afraid I'll come in and mess things up.
Yeah.
As long as you're trying, you're not messing things up.
Yeah. And I think there's been a bit of that from a player or two in the Epic game, and there are some people that just they feel like is that really something wrong with it because he's so good, he really shouldn't be screwing up. Obviously, it must be me then, not the game. But the bads are supposed to be basically a way of for the players of saying something that they didn't like about the game, preferably something that's within the GM's control.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I've had players be like, bad, the weather, and I'm like, I have no I have no pull with that.
I will be honest with you. I mean, I do them in your game, but I've never been a fan of because you do GBUs. I had another GM who required write ups afterwards, to basically campaign. You had to write a report and one GM actually had tests before you'd play a game, and then before the next game he would provide you with a test to make sure you were paying attention. I shy away from all of those. The only instance where I actually do anything even remotely close to that is in Shinetar, where I offer extra experience points to write campaign reports.
Right.
But that's a matter of necessity, part of the world. And when you get into my Justice in Life game, I tell you straight up that this is part of it.
Yeah.
It's an optional part, but by not doing it, you shoot yourself in the foot. I've never been a real big fan of anything where you require players to publicly possibly air out things they don't like, because I've found, and psychologically speaking, I've found that it's diminishing returns. It's much easier for me to get people to be honest in private one-on-one communication, because people are very afraid of putting something in the group for fear that the group will turn on them.
Yeah.
So that's why you're not going to get a lot of bads.
Well,
I mean,
thing,
you are rarely going to get someone talking about something really important in the bads unless it is so blatantly obvious.
yeah. Well, and sometimes it has worked for me. Sometimes, there have been some times where, I did a game and then, and some people were honest with me. There have been sometimes also where I was like, okay, GBUs, and before anyone says it, I know this is a bad, da 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 da. You can still say it, if you agree, but I was like, I even been like, okay, I know I screwed up with this, but it at least puts it out there, and you know what, and maybe I should change it a little. I mean, a lot of people like doing the goods and they like doing the uglies. Because I mean that helps support everyone else. But and maybe I should adjust it a little. But it was actually the GBUs that what brought the glaring problem with the Epic game to light.
Yes.
And not to really kind of oust her for it, but it was Liz that did it. And honestly, I praise and thank her immensely for doing it. I remember it was after we had the tactics meeting, I think, she or it was like maybe right beforehand. I don't remember. Somewhere after she did the initial GBU that brought everything to light. She felt really bad because she was just like, I'm ruining the game, and I'm like, no, hun. You're just the one that brought it to light. You're the one that put the spot that the problem was always there. Apparently, it's just you're the one that finally brought everything to light and made and to me, so it made sense as to what was wrong, because I was sensing that something was wrong. But everyone kept telling me it's like, oh, no, everything's good. So I'm just like, it's like I know when someone's lying, but that doesn't mean I can get the truth out of them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was her coming out and saying it that's what what started the domino fall. And so she was blaming herself, and I'm like, no, hon, the problem was always there. You're just the one that finally brought it to light so I can deal with it. Because if she hadn't done it, then within a few more sessions, I think the game would have fallen apart.
It might very well have.
So.
And I've been fairly honest with you, but I honestly didn't quite know what was going on either at the time. It's one of those weird situations. Again, we're not in person, so it's harder to tell.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird. And I also, again, as I explained before, I have no frame of reference for any of these people other than Liz. I knew something was amiss, but I just couldn't figure it out. And actually, Liz may have just been the first person to see it or first person to put a face on it, but I think everyone.
Go ahead.
No, I think everyone had a sense that there was an issue, but I think we were all, again, we didn't know. We don't know each other as well.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, but Liz was the one that finally put the the face to it, finally put the name to the problem. Um, but I think you're right. I think everyone was noticing something. It's just some people were thinking maybe it was just themselves, or
Yeah.
or it was, and the core of it was there was some miscommunication, some missed signals, but between
Yeah.
players and between myself and the players too.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean,
Again,
because
online is hard
yeah,
without without being able to read body language, without growing a familiarity, without sort of the positive energy or the negative energy that develops when you're in a group physically present. Online, it is so hard. It's like trying to convey emotion in the email. You can write an email one way, and the person can read it, depending on their state of mind, in an entirely different way.
oh yeah,
And without that human-to-human interaction, even with voice,
yeah,
without the ability to see the person, read their micro expressions, and get a sense, it's very difficult to understand stuff. And miscommunications just, I mean, explode online. And I found that to be the case in my own games.
yeah. So, but thankfully, Liz did say something. We've addressed the problem. I've talked to everyone in the group, both offhand as well as together, and things seem to be working out. So,
Yes, no, things are doing
yay for
fantastic.
that.
Game's doing well. I'm
So
very happy for you.
I'm looking forward to tonight and
As
get
am
things moving again. So,
I.
so so yeah, there's been that.
What
Do
else
do
have
you
you
want
been
to
doing in gaming?
continue? Huh?
All right, what else have you been doing in gaming?
What else have I been doing in gaming? Okay, well, actually, a bit.
Oh, nice.
Um, I haven't. I started a Star Trek Next Generation game with Matt and Allison, as kind of a repayment because they helped us out when we had issues at Gen Con. So I'm calling it my Karma games. The Matt and Allison and Ben and Miri um, helped us out. So as payment, I was like, okay, pick any setting, any system, so long as I'm familiar with it. Game of your choice, and I'll run it. And of course, Matt and Allison, I'd run a Star Trek game with before, but it fell through after only a couple of sessions. So they're like, we want to build, continue on that again. So I was like, all right, fine. And then I found out the freaking system cheats you out of points if you do it a certain way. So I was like, okay, well, yeah. I went back through the characters and I was like, okay, well, Allison like actually had like 8 more creation points that she could have used. Um, and but I haven't done that in the past few weeks. We finished the pilot episode with them, and I'm hoping this up and coming week I'll be able to kick into the the first, because I am treating it like a season of Star Trek. So yeah, we had the pilot episode that kind of starts setting the tone, setting the scene. And then I am treating it in episodes. It's what I'm calling the adventures. Um, but unlike original Next Generation, Allison prefers an overarching story, which they really didn't do until like DS9. Um, which was interesting because the previous times I've done Next Generation, I've worked on being more episodic than campaign driven because I'm usually campaign driven. So it made coming up with a story very interesting. Bless you. Liz sneezing in the background. Um, but I think the game I think I've got a better bead on things than I did the first time I ran them. I've got more stuff planned out. I had a couple of kind of iffy campaign ideas, but I figured out I could actually combine all 3 of them to actually make a rather solid one. So the trick is just not to reveal everything too much. I want the option of how long these games last is really kind of up to the players, but I want to give the option that we can actually these games can actually last a while. So I've had to do some outlining and trying to string episodes along to make them make sense and get to where I want them to go. So that's been going on. I actually started the Karma game with Ben and Miri, which Liz is actually that they invited Liz to join them. And that one they had no idea what they really wanted initially. So when I gave them the list of what systems I'm familiar with and what settings I have, all like 30 plus of them, um, they were a little overwhelmed at first. It was kid in the candy store syndrome. Um, but I talked them through it. And I was like, okay, well, what are you all in the mood for? And they're like, well, we don't want to do Star Wars. I was just like, well, there went my best gun. But I was like, all right, that's fine. They're like, we want to do fantasy. I was like, okay, if you want to do fantasy, like high fantasy, I can narrow it down to these settings with these systems. They're like, okay, well, we want to do Pathfinder. We want to get more familiar with Pathfinder. I was like, Pathfinder's great. All right, we're using Pathfinder. All right, that helps narrow it down a little bit better. These are my best settings for Pathfinder. And they boiled it down to two. They wanted to do something in my original my main campaign setting for fantasy, Draco Terramata, the one I'm creating. But they're like, and I've got a few campaign ideas, really big campaign ideas for that setting already. Um, but they're like, we want to do that one, but we want you to do something new with the setting. I was like, God damn it. But I had come up with a story idea back at Gen Con, and it was about basically this corruption starts seeping into a world and corrupting it, and the players have to. I mean, that's all I really come up with. And they're like, we want to do Draco Thermometer, but we really like the corruption idea. I was like, yeah, I can combine them. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah, because the corruption thing was just a story. It wasn't a setting, really. It was just a story idea. I can slap it into Draco Thermometer, no problem. So like, okay, yeah, do that. So I was like, all right. So, and I took this opportunity also to because I'm trying to make Draco Thermometer. I'm trying to step it away from D&D because I built Draco Thermometer as third edition was coming out, so it's very if you know D&D, you can look at my world and be like, yeah, obviously this is a D&D setting. It uses a lot of elements that are from D&D in it, and concepts and whatnot. And I'm trying to break away from that. So I was coming up with new races. I was changing some races in my world. I'm changing some of the cultures and whatnot. So I used this opportunity to help stat out some of those new races because some of the players wanted to play them. And then I worked with Puff as a soundboard because I don't think you were available at the time. Otherwise, I would have used you. Um, I worked with Puff to bounce some of the ideas of like just what exactly the corruption is and what it's doing on my world. Um, and as I was figuring out, of course, the Tetris pieces started coming down in my head. You know, pieces started falling into place, and now I've realized that this campaign could very well be it could very well be like the Great Storm in Shintar. This could be a world changer in my world. And as funny as it is, I may have to dip into some of the other campaigns I've already got for this world just so that they can actually survive. The one main campaign I've got for Draco Tyrannida is what used to be called the Cursed campaign. It's the Broken Sword, and I say that because every time I ran the campaign, almost at like the exact same point every time, the game would fall apart for whatever reason. Like players would move away, players would just fall off the planet, like I'd completely lose touch with them. Other stuff got in the way, scheduling. I mean, you name it. I mean, just whatever it took, just the game fell apart. Except for I did one freeform game that went past that point. And then I ran the game up here with my group up here, and they were like bound and determined to break the curse, and they did. They got actually well beyond the initial, where it usually falls apart, which is why it used to be called the curse campaign. Um, but I may actually have to have this group do the Broken Sword campaign just so that they can then hopefully complete that to then be able to use it against the antagonist in this corruption plot. So I'm just like, this has gone completely blown out of proportion to where I was originally. I was just thinking, oh yeah, I'll just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They explore my world. Yeah, no. This could very well change the entire face of the of my world and the pantheon and just yeah. So I started that game. and we actually played a bit last night. People weren't feeling too well last night, so we weren't entirely sure if we were going to play. But everyone was like, you know what, let's give it a shot. And I'm glad everyone did because everyone did have enjoy themselves and got in better moods and whatnot. So, um, so that was good. And I've been working with, I don't know if I've mentioned, I think I've mentioned before. I've been working with my friend Darcy, um, who's in my Lucky 13 group up here. She's taking her first crack at GMing. And she's got this major plot story world working because she actually apparently like wants to write, wants to turn it into a novel, wants to turn it into a book. But instead of just completely writing it all out herself, she's setting the scene, kind of got an idea of an outline as to where she wants to go with it, and is letting the players help write the rest of it, pretty much, which I've thought about doing on a couple of occasions. Um, and she's got a very intriguing story, very intriguing world, very dark considering what this group usually does. Very dark, very gritty, which I like happy-go-lucky, as much as the next gamer, but sometimes I like a good game sometimes where I'm just like, screw the GM, screw the world, screw everything. God damn it, I want to play more. Which you usually do very well, Howard.
Very much.
So, um, and of course, this is her first time GMing, at all. Like she's never GM'd anything ever before. And I mean, this is a big undertaking for someone that this is their first crack behind the screen. So of course, I offered my assistance. I was like, anything you need help with, I don't metagame think, or at least I try not to. I mean, I'm only human, but for the most part, I try not to let um, knowledge that I learned from the GM by helping them influence the character I'm playing. And I was even offering to be a bit of a plot monkey even for her if I needed to. Um, I came up with one character, a spellcaster per usual almost. Actually, it was a mystic third, so I was going to be a wizard cleric. But she got kind of roped into doing this in Pathfinder. And I say that because some of the other players were like, Pathfinder, is really. I mean, she had played in Pathfinder before with a game or so that I ran and that Tim ran. But she's not as familiar with it as maybe some of the other rule systems she's played in. But there were some members of the group that were like, let's do Pathfinder. She was like, all right, fine, let's do Pathfinder. However, because she wasn't so familiar with it, um, I wouldn't necessarily say she made some bad calls. Just she made some calls that did not fit well with the story she was trying to tell. If that makes more sense. Um,
Yes.
because first and foremost, like she wanted to start us all off at 15th level, which, hey, getting a chance to play a spellcaster that's already high level, woohoo, I'm all for that. But as people were statting out their characters and whatnot, and there were some things, there were some ideas that she had that I think she wanted to surprise us with, but since she didn't tell us, we were going by standard creation rules, which then kind of usurped some of the stuff she wanted to do. But again, since she never told us, we didn't know. Um, but as people were statting their stuff out and buying their magic items and whatnot, because I mean, 15th level character, you start off with like a couple 100,000 gold, so you can get yourself some decent magic items for that. She started realizing that either she was going to have to really upstat her, her antagonists, her monsters and whatnot, or we were just going to break the game very quickly. And thankfully, she wanted to do little one-on-one RPs first to get everyone kind of introduced to the world because she wanted it. She wanted it specifically. She's like one of the things she did tell us about with character creation. She's like, you do not know each other because actually, like racial bigotry is a big theme in her world. Like the four main races is like human, elves, dwarves, and halflings, and they hate each other. Like her world is just recovering from a gods war, very similar to Draco Pteranodon, but in the sense that there's a prime deity for each race, and the deities are pretty much equally matched. So one couldn't get the upper hand on the other, and then they realized they were destroying the world, and they're fighting. So they're like, okay, let's pull back and do this a different way. Well, so they told all of their patron races to pull back and to help rebuild. But in the process of doing that, it was like pull back into yourself, shun anyone who's not your race. So like there's a lot of racism between the four main races, and because of this, like some of the monstrous races, like the orcs and trolls and whatnot, have gained more of a foothold. She's got and then you've got the outcasts, like the half breeds, like half elves and half orcs and whatnot, and they've all banded together and started cannibalism and whatnot, like the mountains. And I mean, it's a fascinating world. So, but she was like, you do not know each other, because most of us were playing of members of different races. And so she's like, because of just the way the world is, she didn't want anyone starting off knowing each other. And then she was doing the one-on-one RPs to introduce everyone to the world, and then to get everyone to a point where she can introduce everyone together and kick the campaign off that way. Well, after doing the one-on-ones with everyone, she started realizing some problems, and she discussed it with me, and I was like, okay, well, it's sounding like we're too high a level. And then she kind of told me where she got the idea of taking 15th, and it had nothing to do with the actual Pathfinder. She was just like, she was basing it off of a different RP system that she was familiar with, where a 15th level is not that high. I mean, it's high, but it's not like, it's not touching on like epic levels like in in D&D and Pathfinder. So I was like, okay, I think you need to bring everyone down. Why don't you kick it down to like 10th level? Because I mean, she still wanted everyone to be epic. She still wanted everyone to be a badass. But I was like, 15th level means you're almost like one of the best in the entire world, and there are people better than us that she's planning. Granted, I mean, well, I don't want to spoil anything unless in case anyone who's listening to this is in that game as well. But I advised her, I was like, why don't you bring everyone down to like 10th level? That's still, because I mean, we started the epic game. I started the epic game at about 8th. And I specifically picked that because I wanted people high enough level to where they could be badasses, but still had a lot of room to grow. And I could still throw interesting stuff at you that won't kill you in one hit, which apparently I probably should have, given the track record that the epic game has had thus far. Because probably y'all would still win. So I was like, bring it down to 10th level, because she was also worried about the whole, because of the Gods War, she was wanting to have it to where there weren't a lot of powerful magic items around. They'd been used up or destroyed or hidden away because of the Gods Wars. So I was like, well, because originally I was suggesting to her, I was like, well, why don't you just limit how much gold everyone has than the standard starting gold for 15th level. Because I was like, that way, we don't have as much buying power. We've got to be a little smarter with our our purchases of magic items. We can't just, unless we crank all of our money into one possible uber thing, then in which case we got nothing else. But then after talking with her more, I was like, why don't you bring it down to 10th level, because that solves a lot of problems. We're not as badass. We don't have as nearly much starting gold. Da 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 da. And after I was talking with her, she made the comment that like practically everyone in the group was a spellcaster to some shape, way, or fashion. We had like a couple of bards. I was playing a wizard cleric. My nose is running. I have no clue why. So I actually kind of had especially with the feel of the world and story, because she got the idea initially from 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. Have you seen the movie, Howard?
Yes, love that movie.
It's a great movie. I know it's based off of a book, and I love actually what I heard was kind of the premise behind the book was someone was making the comment to the author that like Beowulf couldn't have actually been a real event just because of how fantastic it seemed to sound, and the author was like, oh yeah, it could. and wrote that story to kind of prove it's like, look, just because it's fantastical doesn't mean it isn't rooted in an actual real event. Which is why you've got a lot of the whole symbolism and them figuring stuff out in the movie. So I decided to change my character idea, um, because I figured it'd be a little easier than having to dumb my character down some, considering down to 10th level I couldn't even start taking the prestige class I had. So I actually went complete. This might shock you. I actually went complete opposite of what my other character was. My first character idea was a wizard sorcerer, was a wizard cleric mystic thurge. I went to fighter forsaker.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, because that solves her issues with the magic items. That solves her issues with too many spellcasters in the group. That gets a guaranteed bruiser tank into the group. Um, and I even came up with a story like he actually like my first level was paladin, um, but something happened and he lost his faith and is now an ex paladin, then raised up in levels of fighter, and then has this grudge against spellcasters, but in particular a grudge against clerics and the gods, because it's basically in his mind it's because of the gods wars and because of the clerics and spellcasters that what's caused a lot of the problems in the world. So that's why he's become a forsaker. Um, and I was gonna play him human, but she was just like, she wanted me to play something different, and she tossed out dwarf, and I was just like, sure, I'll play a dwarf. So she was like, yes, she's like, please play a dwarf. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So so I have a dwarvish ex paladin fighter forsaker in this group now in this game, and actually, like she and I started our one on one last weekend, and we're going to try to finish it tomorrow. I just need to finish buying my gear, which buying gear for a Forsaker is easy as hell because they can't use any magic items. So I was like, okay, everything I've got is masterwork and and special materials, and then I just buy like a lot of alchemical items.
Wait, alchemical items don't fall into
The magic items, no,
issues?
no, because alchemical items are basically just D&D chemistry. There isn't actually any magic infused into them. It's chemical reactions.
Oh.
So like Tanglefoot bags, Thunderstones, Alchemist fire, acid flasks, stuff like that. Yeah. In fact, I took ranks in craft alchemy so he can make his own shit. Um,
There you go. He's a
Yep.
scientist.
yeah, just about.
He's that basically, a Forsaker alchemist, pretty much by definition, is a scientist.
Yep. So, but I actually like and of course I'm going to use some of my money to buy some magic items just so I have something I can destroy, so I can keep my damage reduction up. But I forgot to say something about that, and I hadn't quite bought all my gear yet when we started the one on one. So I was like, well, I forgot to, those kind of things. If I forgot to say it, it's not happening. I don't have it. I'm not going to try to retcon, ask her to retcon it. I'm just going to go. And so we get into a fight, and I come across this orc, this badass orc. Like, I'm a dwarvish mercenary, pretty much. And we're getting hired on by a group of halflings to deal with um, this these like troll generals that are invading and raiding this area, and one of their big fortresses just fell. So like I'm being hired to be the distraction while the halflings go sneak in and find out what the hell is going on and see what they can do of usurping it back. So we come across a scouting party, and of course it's a bunch of dwarves. Subtlety is not in our is not in our repertoire. So we come across a scouting party and start waylaying into, it was a group of goblins and a group of gnolls. And then of course we made so much noise that one of the other scouting parties heard us and came and engaged us. And of course I was like, two hits, I was dropping enemies left and right. And I was having a blast. She was starting to get afraid though that I was going to be, I wasn't going to be enjoying it because they were too easy to kill. I was just like, these are mooks. this is a scouting part. I know these are goblins. I know full well. I mean, they're not going to pose a challenge, but that's okay because and slaughtering them is fun. So, but then I come across the boss, which was this badass orc, um, and he had a magical great axe, and he had a decent AC. Like, I actually had to roll something stupid like a 16 or higher just to be able to possibly hit him. Whereas the other guys, I could have rolled like a 4 and I could hit him. And obviously he, like, in the entire battle, which took like, I want to say 8 or so rounds for just him alone, me and the other dwarves that started gathering with me to help fight him, we only got him down to half hit points. So I mean, this guy was beast. And I was just like, okay, challenge accepted. And I tried, I tried to do different things because at first I was just doing my usual full attack action. I get like 3 attacks. But I was like, wait a second, I'm a Forsaker. Just walking up and waylaying is not, because I've gotten hit a few times too. So I was like, walking up and just waylaying anything, I need to fight smarter than this. So I tried to do a few combat maneuvers. I tried to trip him. I didn't roll too well on that. But she let me like roll some damage because basically I took the flat end of I wield a greatsword. I took the flat end of my greatsword and just whacked him across the knees. And I was like, well, I failed the trip attack. She was like, yeah, but that's like an adamantine great. You know what? Roll some damage for that. And I was just like, half damage? She was like, yeah, sure, half damage. So I rolled a d6 and busted his knee up a little. But then I was like, wait a second. And I started realizing, I was like, if I don't do something, he eventually will wear me down. Like, the Forsaker has fast healing, but I can only heal up to so many hit points a day. And, he got me to, like, almost half hit points. Actually, I think he did get to half hit points. I had to use a feat I had to gain some more. And I was like, I need to do something. I was like, wow, I really wish I had my damage reduction. Wait a second, he's wielding a magic axe, isn't he? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I did a sunder attack. So basically attacking his weapon, not him. And adamantine, since my sword is adamantine, it ignores hardness of objects. So it's really key toward destroying objects and like constructs and stuff. So I rolled it and succeeded and broke his magic axe, thereby destroying a magic item of sufficient value that I got my damage reduction up for 24 hours for the Forsaker. So I was like, okay, game on. Unfortunately, he then busted out a sharpened shield that could like freeze you and destroy you. And apparently his shield was the better weapon. I didn't realize it at the time. And unfortunately, because of his shield, his AC went up higher. I was like, God fucking damn it. But we finally got him to like half hit points, and then he ran off. And I was like, fucker. But I didn't do the stupid thing either. I was just like, okay, he's running off. He's pretty fast. I dropped, I put my sword away, pulled out my bow, and fired off a few arrows. Didn't hit him. After another round or so, I was like, okay, he's out of range, and I ain't chasing after him. I can't keep up. I'm a dwarf. He's obviously busting out at higher than 30 feet around. I'm sitting here on my 20, so that ain't happening. So that was fun.
Sounds it.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to finishing the one-on-one and then seeing how the game itself actually pans out with everyone else. Because also there's apparently a new guy that the rest of the group has gamed with some, but I haven't yet. I haven't even met the guy yet. So I'm hoping to actually get a chance to meet him, and because I've heard he's really cool. So yeah, and of course I always like meeting new gamers. Yeah, I think that's about it. That is what I've been doing in gaming recently. Good lord, I went on for a while.
Yes, you did.
Sorry about that. But you asked.
Yes.
So what about you?
Well, I kind of need to be brief because we kind of need to move on to the topic. Shine Tower has been going very well.
So say that again. You were cutting out.
All right. No, no, Shine Tower's going well. It's moving at pace. We just added a new player in person, which is fantastic. They've been
Cool.
asking for it. Um, Other than that, most of my other games have been Wednesday's game has been on hold just because of life stuff, which is
That's
part
the
of our
that's
topic.
the that's the Saga game, right?
Correct.
Ah,
And then, of course, my Rockets campaign has restarted, not restarted, but has picked up after a long, long hiatus, and it's going gangbusters.
awesome.
Uh, One of the player characters has decided to make a deal with the devil, and he has allied himself with the Imperial Inquisitor that's been hunting him
Wh- Which
hunting him for
which
over a decade.
which, if I remember correctly, is what you wanted them to do eventually.
I've been planning for it for about 5 years.
Yeah, you suck.
But I just had to get them to do it without making them do it, because players, if a GM, at least my players, if the players think you're trying to force them into something, they will do whatever they can to stop it and not do it,
Yeah,
to be as contrary as possible. So as a good GM, you have to learn the trick of convincing players that it was their idea,
yeah. Well,
and
either
then they'll
that
go along
or
with whatever plans you have.
well, I've also found though that sometimes if you just tell them ahead of time, it's like, look, you know, this is what needs to happen, or this is what's going to happen, or this is what sometimes if you're actually very blunt, they'll do it. Some will do it. Others will go against it just to to spite. But you got some players that will they'll be like, okay, that's what needs to happen. All right, let's do it. So, but yeah, overall, you do need to be subtle. Sorry, continue.
But yes, so I've been able to maneuver them into that position, which is fantabulous. Um, Other than that, not a whole lot. I'm doing some Roll20 games online for Shintar, some huge events, world events. Oh, and I just introduced in the world of Shintar, I just introduced the first regional mini arc. I'm doing a lot of the firsts, and I've been given permission to do my own story arc for the whole Justice in Life. So
Nice.
yeah, so Rising Darkness, you'll like this one. And well, no, you like in Dragon Con. The player characters found a corrupted temple to Venar, which is the evil ascended that's with darkness and corruption, undead. And they discovered a temple that was so ancient that when the temple was built, Venar was still one of the good guys. So
Oh
this temple
wow.
precedes the fall. So it's like 6,000 years old.
Nice.
And obviously, it was one of his original temples. When he fell, it corrupted with him. It was one of the first temples to corrupt. And as a matter of fact, so it had some of his oldest servants in it.
Mm.
And what they discovered is they came upon an arcane rite in which young avatars. I'm talking. What I mean is living young individuals representing the five good ascended. Were ritually sacrificed, and their blood was pooled and used to raise a master vampire of immense power.
Ooh.
Yes, they managed to stop. They managed to. Well, they didn't stop the right. They managed to enter it right as he rose, and they engaged in combat. Unfortunately, he was too. In his case, he was too weak to destroy them utterly. So instead, he fled. Because imagine this. Imagine you just woke up after sleeping for a long time, and it's a bunch of dudes just kick in your door.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm a little groggy. I don't have all my equipment. Let me run out the back door. Let me get some rest.
Yeah.
Let me get all my stuff
Be
together.
smart about it.
Yeah. Well, no, this villain is all about the smartness.
Yeah.
So he fled. So the player characters had to report back that yes, they were able to break up. Yes, they killed a bunch of his servants, but unfortunately, the master vampire escaped. He is the centerpiece for the entire thing. The arc is the Rising Darkness, and as it turns out that at one point, about 3,000 years ago, he ruled this area. Like that temple was in his territory,
Yeah.
and he has come back to take what is rightfully his. However, he's been sleeping for a couple hundred years, and so when he woke up, the world has changed a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh yeah.
In the last 100 years or so, new enemies have reemerged. Ancient enemies have reemerged. New enemies are coming into Shintar. It's crazy. So he wakes up in a world unlike anything he knew, and so he is taking some time to see what new things are there for him to have. And so, unlike most of the villains in Shintar or in most fantasy, where they only deal with their tropes,
Hmm.
this guy is willing. This guy's willing to make any deals with anyone so long as it brings him power.
Yeah.
So he has darkness forces, he has flame forces, he has builder forces, he has tempest forces. He doesn't care. He's a smart villain. He
Yeah.
uses whatever resources are available, and so he is. So that's my story arc. He is taking over,
The region.
basically the Northern Wildlands region. That's his goal, and he is well on his way to succeeding. But this is going to be a game that's going to involve, and an interesting thing about it is, and Corman might be interested in getting involved in this, but the bottom line is I've opened it up to player characters, or well, GMs. I've opened it up to GMs, and I'm saying, listen, if you want to be part of this story arc, this is yours to make your own. Not only will am I putting elements out there so everyone can play in the sandbox. If you want to add an element to my story arc, let me know and I'll include it. So I'm actually adding elements and modifying the story arc to customize it by the requests of various GMs so they can make it their own.
Hmm.
Totally interactive.
Interesting.
It is a completely interactive storyline.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So that's going on.
I, I,
And
I, 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 I sorry to interrupt, but I like the fact that Shintar. And honestly, I do think it's either because of you or because of the fact that I know you and you've got the inner track of information. But Shintar is not ceasing to amaze me, if at the very least interest me every time. You tell about something new that's going on with it. I'm intrigued and fascinated. So
we also the Suzerain Continuum. There's a couple other games. There's the Accursed is the Savage World setting, as well as there's a couple other ones that we're doing. Oz is another one. Tempest comes from the Godstrike Tempest. That comes from another one. And believe it or not, things are crossing into Shintar. Accursed vampires, which is a different kind of vampire. So they're now actually two. There are two types of vampires in Shintar, completely
uh,
different. Different corruption, different abilities, different weaknesses. So there are actually two classifications of vampires: the traditional and then the modern vampires. And believe it or not, modern vampires will be showing up in the Rising Darkness. So you actually, as a Slayer, we have Slayer organizations. I don't know if you knew that. They're
no.
actually they're monster hunter or they're vampire hunters and demon hunters in Shintar. It's
Hmm.
built into the world. And so now the Slayers all of a sudden have an entirely new type of vampire they have to fight that is completely different than anything they've spent eons learning how to fight. Now they've got a new kind they've got to learn.
Yeah,
So
that's gonna fuck some of them up.
there are going to be a lot of dead Slayers in the next couple months until they
Yep.
kind of get their
Because I mean,
feet.
if there's only been the one type of vampire and they've been fighting them for centuries, then they pretty much think that they know it all. And now we've
Yep,
got a new target coming out. Yeah, they're dead.
there's going to be a lot of deads. But see, there's something always shaking up.
Yep.
With that said, I'm announcing it now. In the next book coming out of Shintar, Magic and Cosmology, Volume 1. There's going to be two Magic and Cosmology books. These are your books, dude. Uh,
Okay.
Magic and Cosmology, Volume 1, I am in it.
As in,
A writer.
oh sweet,
I am specifically mentioned.
awesome, rock on. I hate you.
So, publication credit there.
Yep.
And I'm meeting the business manager for Shintar, for Evil Beagle Games this coming week. To finalize plans to work on the layout of the e-zine Raven's Feathers. That's my first announcement. Um, and with luck, within the month, the first e-zine companion publication for the Justice and Life setting will be available for purchase on DriveThru RPG and RPG Now. I believe the price point is $5, but that's subject to change.
Hmm.
The interesting thing about this is I'm putting this out there to all of our listeners. There will be links when it comes up. I'm encouraging everyone to purchase this. If you're interested, as Byron just said, if you're interested in Shintar, it's an amazing world. Justice in Life is an experiment that has just brought great dividends. please, support us, purchase the $5 e-zine for the awesomeness value of it. And the fact is that I am the director. It's my first project in publication, and I'm an author, so I will be published.
And it'll make you look good.
Yes, but I will be.
little selfless promotion there. That's all right.
It is, but I'm by the end of this month, I will be published in gaming. I will be a gaming writer, officially.
Fuck on.
Yes. So that's what I've been doing in gaming.
Sweet. And the Epic game, which we discussed first off.
Oh, you covered that.
Well, we covered that, but so, oh, jeez. All right. Well, do we actually have a subject for this?
Yes, we
week?
did. Yes, we did. I would like to introduce it if I could.
Oh, please.
So, I said I had a new player, and he is awesome. He also is a father.
Which you're about to be.
Which I'm about to be. And in order for him to come into the game, he had to bring his daughter. I think she was around 2 years old. And for a 2-year-old, she did an amazing job.
Okay.
But that brought us to something. That one of my players, just in my Shintar game, one of my players is in college, finishing up college after a 13-year stint in the military.
Wow.
5 times in the sandbox. Okay?
Oh, wow. 5 tours?
5 tours, I think.
Damn.
13 years. MP, all kinds of craziness.
Oh, wow, okay. Jay was an MP.
One of my players is a father of 2 and married. I'm married with a kid on the way, and my new player has a 2-year-old. And this brings me to my topic. Aging in gaming. When we started this, we started in high school. In the military academy. I'd started in the military academy. You'd started a little bit before. But, I would say our formative years were RMA.
Yeah.
We were teens, preteens or teens. We were immature. We were young. We were...
At a military academy.
At a military academy. Trapped. Didn't have driver's license. Didn't have cars. Didn't have wives. The world was entirely different.
Most of us didn't even have girlfriends.
And obviously... That is true. I didn't. But that was by choice.
Yeah.
But the bottom line was we had a worldview, and it was great.
Yep.
But as we've gotten older, we've gone through school, we've gone through college, we've gotten married, some of us have had kids, some of us are in the process. And the point is that gaming changes. And as it changes, adapt or die. A lot of people... And I remember in college, getting out of high school and then getting into college, and as people started going through college, I remember people lamenting, and it was like, well, soon we're no longer going to be able to game. Soon we're going to have to get jobs, and we're going to get married and have families, and gaming has to stop. And, it's something that I have actually been concerned about as I got older, is that, at what point do I just have to give up gaming because I'm going to have to, grow up and be an adult and, and move on to more important things. Over the last, I started in 2001, but over the last year, my writing within the gaming community and my contribution to the gaming community and my contacts with the actual game producers, game designers, and game companies has exploded. As you know, my connections with AEG, my connections with Evil Beagle Games, my connections with you, with Legion, other places. And I am now beginning to work in the industry as a writer, as a community manager, as a content contributor. And so I'm now I'm on the cusp of actually making money doing something that I love. Now, I'm not going to be buying a penthouse. I'm not going to be retiring from, my day job, nothing like that. But for the first time, I might actually be able to bring in some income to sort of justify the games that I play as a business expense. But it really brings up an interesting concept because we had a 2-year-old in our game, moving around. She was talking to her dad. She wasn't being disruptive, but she's a 2-year-old. And he as a father, he's like, I'd like to game. I'd like to go out and get out of this house because all I do is work and take care of my daughter. I'd like to socialize with other adults. I'd like to do something I love, but I have a daughter. How do you game with a child? And he talked to me about it. I said, bring her. He's like, are you sure? And I'm like, bring her. One of the other guys is a dad. I'm about to be a father. These changes are just something that we have to accept are going to happen. And then we have to modify our gaming style, our schedules, and our behavior to accommodate. And it's tough. It is really, really tough.
Wow.
Why is your Epic game online?
Okay, you cut out there for a quick second, but to answer your question, um, online, well, two major reasons. The first major reason is the fact that all the players that I wanted to be in it are nowhere near local. I mean, I'm in Pennsylvania, you're in Georgia, Matt and Allison are in North Carolina, Miri's in South Carolina now, although she was in Michigan when we started, and Puff is in Maryland. So everyone I wanted to play in the everyone that I chose to play in the game, it was nowhere near local. So in-person game was out of the question if I wanted this to happen. Second of all, also is online tends to work a little better in the terms of scheduling because it's easier for people to get home, get on their computer, and get online than it is to get in a car and drive somewhere.
Yeah, because we have jobs, we have
Yep.
careers, we have families. And this is what I'm talking about is that, I know a lot of people pretty much think that when you grow up and get married and have a family, you have to stop gaming. And I thought that as well myself when I was a lot younger. Talk about a different perspective. I figured that one day that I'd just get old enough that I would have to quit. But what I'm beginning to understand is that, like everything, age and the change requires change. It requires a different attitude toward gaming. It requires different techniques. As you point out, it also, as you mature, your games take on different themes.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be honest with this, we were really immature when we started.
Oh hell yes.
And sex was a mystery, and relationships and marriage, and our perspective on relationships was just juvenile.
Well, again, we were juvenile.
But that's my point. But as you as
Yeah.
you get older, as you mature, the things that entertain you, the things that you enjoy, change. And it's
Yep.
interesting, because you and I have been gaming. I've been gaming with you since I started. I mean, you were
Yep.
my first GM. So it's interesting to look back and see how the subject matter has changed, how our attitudes toward various things have changed, the complexity of the games have changed,
Yeah.
um, based on life experience.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, what tactics? I'm going to offer this to you. What tactics have you begun to develop as you've gotten older in gaming to accommodate for families, for careers, for school? What have you done for your gamers? What rules have you put in place? What safety nets? What accommodations have you had to make that have become, and think about it, things that have become rules or become, maybe not spoken, but what things have you had to do for your gamers to keep the games alive?
Well, first, I feel like I need to put my 2 cents in on something you said earlier.
Sure.
In the sense of once I discovered gaming, really discovered because I mean my brother used to play D&D, back in the day, and I always thought I was like, ooh, that's new and interesting. What the heck is that? But I was too young. Um, I will have to comment a bit that Joe may not have necessarily been the greatest of teachers at the time, but I probably wasn't ready to learn either. So I'm not trying to knock Joe entirely, but he did at least open the door for me. It was actually Cyrus who really taught me. Um, but once I discovered gaming, and once I was like, this is perfect for me. This is what I want to do. I actually find it interesting that you had the thought of like eventually you would have to quit because that thought has never crossed my mind. In all honesty, I'm not trying to like be boastful or anything. I have never had the thought as like I will give up gaming entirely. I've taken breaks because I've burned out a couple of times. When I was at college, mom was concerned that I was spending too much time gaming and not enough time on my studies, and then I also had to get a part time job. So I actually took an entire quarter off. Well, it didn't last the entire quarter. I took some time off from gaming because I tried to focus on the other things and then realized I had no outlet. I had nothing. I had no stress breaker, so I had to kick a game up pretty quick. Otherwise, I was going to go nuts. Um, but and I think it's also helped to the fact of my exposure to some other gamers has shown that age doesn't matter as much. Jay Van Gordon being a wonderful example. He's the one that really kind of got me into, taught me D&D and whatnot. And he was, he was a big gaming source at RMA. I mean, here's a guy in his, he was our FTO, he was our flight training officer. He was the one in charge of my hall for summer school in my senior year. So, here's a guy married with a job, games whenever he can. Unfortunately, nowadays, because I've still kept in touch with him, unfortunately nowadays he hasn't gamed in years because of his location and his job. Because his job has he actually works as a security officer at a jail, so his job keeps him very wonky schedules. Um, so they're so I've always seen that's like, okay, gaming doesn't have to end with age. Um, and it never really occurred to me. I remember at one point in time when I got when I started dating Liz, and though I didn't get her into gaming, I definitely put her gaming into overdrive. Um, Her mom at one point when we brought up that, I think it was while we after we were engaged, if not married, her mom even asked. She was like, "I thought you would have grown out of that phase," and she kind of looked at her mom like she was crazy. She was like, "No." So I've always known, once I got into it, I've always known this is what I'm doing. I mean, I've said it on a couple of occasions that gaming is pretty much what defines me. At least one of the core pillars of my being is gaming. So, that being said, I've definitely had to adjust to be able to keep the dice rolling. I have definitely had to play an adaptive game, because I mean, like you said, just our own personalities, our own likes, our dislikes, what interests us has changed. Because I mean, if you think about it, we've been gaming for like, what was the last time I figured, like 18 years or something.
Yeah,
You
something
know,
like that.
so I mean, yeah, obviously change is going to happen. One of the big changes that I've noticed is I cannot GM as long as I used to. Like
Yes,
I used to be able,
yes.
be able to GM for a full day. Like snow days at AIW, it was a tradition. If we had a snow day at AIW, we'd gather up in one of our student housings and game all day. I can't do that anymore. Not without like some substantial breaks in between times. Like I'm lucky. I'm lucky if I can do a 4 to 6 hour session. And unfortunately, like, unless we start late, I've geared up and keeping the energy of the game going. I can't game very late either. I can't do all nighters anymore. It's just, it saddens me, but it's the fact. I mean, I am older than I'm not as young as I used to be. God, I hate saying that.
It's
So
crazy, but it's
it,
true.
it is. But one of the things that I've discovered is build it and they will come. Even if sometimes you got to go out and find them. Um, so basically, the way I've always made sure that there is a game is I make sure there's a game, which again puts me behind the GM screen 9 times out of 10. Which, although Liz harks on me the fact that I've been playing a lot more, especially recently, than usual, and I have been enjoying it, but one of my kind of stereotypical complaints is the fact that I don't get to play as much as as often as I'd like, which is still true, but that's because I would really like it if I could be gaming every day, um, and screw work, but obviously that doesn't pay the bills
Yeah.
yet. So, but I always try to make sure I've got at least a game going, and I find people. It's one thing where like I love how some people comment to where they go into an area and they're like, there's no gaming store, there's no game going on where I am, and I was just like, then start one. I mean, go, obviously, if you've got friends in the area and they're not gamers, introduce it to them, corrupt them.
Yeah.
Yes, everywhere I go, I have no qualms finding players. I have no issues, no problems finding players. I will admit sometimes they haven't exactly been the best players. I've played Russian roulette a bit and not always been, sometimes I've shot myself, but because I was the one that loaded the bullet into the gun. You know, I always go, and if I can't find a gaming store, which I've always been able to find at least something somewhat local. Um, if I don't know of a group, I start one, and through that, I've been introduced to other people, other groups, and expand from there. So my first comment is that if you really want to keep gaming, keep keep it going, even if you've got to be the one that orchestrates it, that organizes it, that goes out and finds the players and puts it together. If you really want to do it, then you got to do it. Um, so that's been one of the key things for me as to what's kept gaming strong in my life is just because to me there's nothing else really. I mean, yeah, there's work and life and my beautiful wife. I mean, don't get me wrong, but my beautiful wife games too. So I mean, so I'm kind of lucky on that point. Um, in the terms of like helping adjust for other people's schedules and whatnot, I've got two main tactics. Um, First and foremost, I, I, I I always try to keep my games very democratic. In the sense of it's the majority, it's what the group wants to do. So one rule that I've used that helps, I think helps keeps things sometimes is if if half or more of the group can't make to the game's canceled unless I know of something I can specifically do one on one, or side quest stuff with those that are involved. Um, if if half the group is out of it, you can pretty much assume I'm not I'm not running it. I don't mind plot holing one or two people, obviously depending on the size of the group. And having that flexibility, I'm pretty good about plot holing people. So having that flexibility too is what, because there are some people like, oh, if one person's not there, we're not gaming. That tends to hurt a group. Um, Actually, that's kind of been the rule with Epic Game, and that was a slight thorn in things recently. Only slight comparative to everything else, but I know that was brought up. So, um, so having the flexibility of being able to plot if one person is missing, being able to plot hole them effectively, and keep the game going. Therefore, you're gaming more often. And obviously, if that one person is constantly missing games, then you might need to talk to that person and be like, hey, I know you really want to be in this, but you got to ask a little from the players. Like if they're in a position where they can try to adjust their schedule at work, ask them to do so if it's becoming an issue. Um, Actually, one player, Chris, I know was work like specifically asked him what days that he would recommend not scheduling him, and he gave some days so that he could, because he knew those were days that the gaming could be happening. Um, and then work scheduled him for those days anyway. So sometimes it's not in the
Typically,
players.
well, no, typically I've found out, especially in hourly places, that the reason they ask you what days you want off are they know that those are the days that they're going to want to schedule you to interrupt your life as much as possible. That's what I am
Especially
convinced.
considering he works for the government too. So
Oh God, yeah. They're like, so what days would you like off? Okay, so schedule
yeah,
Mondays, Wednesdays, and
but like
Fridays.
when I worked for Walmart, I originally told them that I could work any day, any hours. Because at the time I was open, and Walmart, as much as the place sucks, they did have one thing that it was a double-edged sword, but overall it was a good thing. They put out their schedule 3 weeks in advance,
Nice.
so almost an entire month ahead of time when you're working. So it was easy to then schedule games around that. But then I remember there was one game I was having to where I we needed to have it on a set time, set day, because that's just what worked for everyone else. So, and it was on a Sunday. So I told work then I was like, okay, I then started putting little restrictions on my schedule. I was like, I can only work in the mornings on Sunday. I have to be out by noon so that I could then run over to my friend's house and run game. And then eventually I told him I was like, I just can't work Sundays at all because it was only for a few. It got to the point it was only a few hours. And it just seemed kind of like a waste. I was like, I can get my hours elsewhere. So, um, but having that flexibility, um, being flexible helps. Um, of course, my jamming style in general is very adaptive to begin with, so I think that kind of helped some.
I got a question.
Um,
Have you ever thought about, and I've been wondering about this more and more, considering, of course, that I'm about to have a kid. I'd be interested if it would be possible to have like a situation, especially when you have parents, because we're all about the same age. Most of us are gonna have kids about the same age. To be like, well, you know what? Two or three of us have kids. Bring the kids, and put them in a playpen, in the room with us, and basically having like a gaming daycare type thing where
yeah,
the kids are there playing with each other.
I've heard of some people that used to do that. Mary, because her both of her parents are gamers. Mary said some of her first memories were her parents taking her to their games and setting her down elsewhere. I don't remember if she had with other kids as she was playing with other kids as well while they were gaming, but that was some of her first memories. So I know of some people that do that. Um, I've also been hearing more and more recently of people obviously getting their kids into it too.
Yeah, they're
I,
actually there are actually some specifically like child
yeah,
designed for kids.
yeah. And I remember there was one like illustrator who his like 4 year old for his birthday wanted his dad to run him in a D&D game. So he took fourth edition and simplified it down further and illustrated up these really cute and cool character sheets and illustrations and that's the character sheets he handed out to everyone and basically was just like, all right, what do you want to do? So
It's interesting. The gaming has changed a lot, and
yeah,
they're now doing kid friendly games. It's becoming, back in the 80s and 90s, it was seen as pretty much demon worship and a cult and
it was
and
it was it was very much teen. It was either like teen to 20s, like high school, college years, or you were the
creepy old.
30 to 40 to 50 living in your parents' basement stereotypes
But
as being the only people that played.
it's not
But
that way anymore. I mean, we have kid friendly games. We have, I mean, it's become mainstream, and that has its own ills, and that's something that we've talked about before,
yep,
mainstream versus whatever. But it's interesting as you mature, you get older, and you have these responsibilities, you have these complications, the scheduling issues, the careers, the families. I mean, you have to be creative and come in ways of coming about it. You also have to be flexible and willing, And I asked the other gamers after the guy came, I was like, did you have any problems with the kid? And they were like, not really. I mean, she did really well. One of the other players, like, I've already got kids or whatever. It was weird. I'm sitting there at a table running a game. One dude, he can't show up until after 8 or 9 o'clock, or basically 8 o'clock is his earliest because he has to get the kids home, put them to bed, wait till his wife gets back from work, get her taken care of before he's allowed to come out and play. So
right,
he always has to accommodate for their schedule, and I understand that. So he never can come earlier than a certain amount of time. The player sitting next to him, she's in school, as I said, military and school, and so she. What's funny is basically she has scheduled her school schedule around my game. She's like, I don't work these days. I don't do things these days. She says, she told me that she said, I have all these tests, but I always make sure that I study around so that I have this 5 hour block to come to your games. And then, we have a guy here who's brought his 2 year old. And then meanwhile, we have one of my players was actually online in Atlanta because he can't afford to come up here because of the economy. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I got a player with a 2 year old sitting here. I got this guy who showed up late because he has a family. She's in college, just got out of the military, and I got a dude Skyping in basically from Atlanta because he works. I think he works for the government. I think he works for the post office, and just because of all the cutbacks and stuff like that, he can't even afford gas to get to the game. And I'm like, this is a different scene from when
Yeah.
we started in a military academy, a bunch of kids chucking dice in those whitewashed walls. I mean, it is just, it's changed.
Yep.
I
And they
mean,
were
the
and they
game
were
is
gray,
still,
not white.
they seem whitewashed to me.
Well,
But
they may have been up in band hall, you fucker.
yeah, I think they were white up there. But it, it's just, the game has changed, but the passion for it has only gotten deeper. And I think that comes with maturity. I think as you begin and to think that these people are doing all of this to come to your table as a
Yeah.
GM.
Well,
I mean, it's incumbent upon you to be there for them.
yeah, hell, at college at AIW, I had people skipping classes to make my games. And I tried to tell them again. I tried to promote against that because we were on a quarter schedule, so our semesters were only 11 weeks.
Yeah.
And so every quarter, when we got our schedules at the beginning of the quarter, I'd meet up with everyone to be like, okay, when's the block that the most people have available, that they're out of classes. Okay, that's when the club is meeting. But sometimes people got left out, and sometimes I'd be running something, like at student housing, with those there. But I had some people that literally like would go in, get counted for attendance, go to the bathroom, and then come back, and then come to game because they had class during when the rest of us were gaming and they wanted to be in it. And I'm like, don't do that. I was
Yeah.
like, you're here for school for a reason. I realize that obviously you like my game and I'm very appreciative, but don't skip class. Go to freaking class. And some of them are like, oh no, it's okay. And in some cases it was like I remember Liz had one class that she was already so familiar with the subject matter she probably could have taught the class, and the teacher knew it. So the teacher just let her do kind of whatever. So long as she actually showed up. So she'd show up and then just be like, yeah, I got something else. And the teacher would be like, yeah, whatever. So, but there were some people that like literally, they'd only come in for like 5 minutes and they'd be like, okay, I want my character to do this, and then go back. And then like a couple minutes later, come back. And I'm like, don't you have class? They're like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm like, motherfucker, get back to class.
But
So,
it's, I gotta say though, we're sitting here. I wish we'd had a podcast when we were kids, so we could have talked about everything then, so that we could do this now. Because in 20, 30,
I'd be afraid.
20 or, well, no, in 20 or 30 years, when we're retired, our kids, my kids have grown up, I've driven the RV up to see you. I really want to record a, if Ropai Gamma, if Ropai is no longer, going, I'd love to sit down and listen to this podcast today on the 10-1. Is this our 10-11?
As I say,
I couldn't see it because it was blocked. I'm like, wait a minute, no, it's 11th. On this day, and I would love to, like, in 30 years look back to this and just see how the game has changed. Then retired, we're our careers are wrapping up. My kids are gone. It's going to be interesting to look back and just to see how far we've come.
yeah.
And what challenges then? Medical issues, like like I can't make it. I throw out my back. Where's my heart medicine? I can't see the.
That thing was too exciting. Where's my nitro pill?
I can't see that. I can't read the dice anymore. Why are the dice so small?
Oh, that's gonna be interesting.
Game or die, buddy.
But of course, look at how, like you said yourself, that the gaming in of itself has changed in the last 20 years.
Yes, and what will it look like in another?
Yeah, I'd say what. Well, we might have freaking cybernetic implants. Just plug in, and then off we go.
Virtual reality.
Who cares how old you are? Because in the freaking computer you can be whatever the hell you want. So,
Oh my God.
who knows? Who knows, man?
It's gonna be interesting, dude.
Oh
It's
yeah,
gonna be interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to making my mark in it too. Although falling a little behind on my schedule. I need to fucking get caught back up on that.
Hey man,
You- you-
I'm with like within this month. I'm gonna be there. Like I'll have my
yeah,
first. I'll have my first.
I was about to say you are making your mark, and I am jealous. But on the flip side, though, I think we've already discussed that the path you've taken and the path I'm taking are obviously two different paths. So
Indeed.
you're taking the one that you work with best. I'm trying to take the one that I work with best. Although I still need to work on that some, but say lovey. So, but yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I mean, shoot, just if you were to go back and listen to the first few episodes 5 years
Yeah.
ago of Ropai, a lot of things have changed. So anyway, unless you got something else, I figure we can kind of start wrapping this up.
Definitely. Real quick. Are we
Sure.
planning on doing one more before, like one more game for the season closer for this season?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up that because of your baby being on the way and because of my work schedule and whatnot, that we're probably going to wrap up the season here soon. I think the season has been kind of shorter than some of the others, but we started late in the year, and then we've had a lot of gaps in this one as we've been getting used to new formats and whatnot. I would like to do a season finale here soon, and we usually do try to go out with a game. And I think you offered to run something.
Yes, I'm thinking. Ask people. I'm thinking Deadlands. It's
Okay.
not something we've done on the podcast. It's
Nope.
Savage Worlds, which I'm very familiar with.
Yep.
I love the Deadlands setting. It's really easy to put together.
We had talked about doing the new Fantasy Flight Star Wars and doing a full review of it. However, as you and I were discussing this morning, thanks to Fantasy Flight, that makes things a little difficult. So we're probably going to have to shelve that for next season. But yeah, Deadlands would be fine. I'll ask at Epic Games, see if anyone else wants to join in on that. Obviously, though, we'll want to keep the group somewhat small. So what kind of limit are you thinking?
3 to 4, like 3 to 4 at the most.
At the most, okay. So myself and 2 to 3 others.
Yep. And you will be
Alrighty.
playing a huckster.
I'm doing the huckster, huh?
You are. You may play anything you wish to play, so long as it's a huckster.
Hey, you can pick any color you want, as long as it's black. I take it that's the spellcaster of the setting, huh?
Yes, and it's not like anything you've ever played.
I remember you telling me about it before, so yeah, that's going to be interesting. Sure, I'll do that. That's not a problem. So, alrighty. So probably what we will do is like with other seasons, it'll be a two-parter. We'll do the first part as the season finale of the game, and then the second part of the game will be the season premiere of the next season, hopefully. Depending on how you do your adventure. I don't know if you can get it done in one session.
Oh yeah, no. We'll do 2 sessions. I'll try to make it so that I leave you guys on a ridiculous cliffhanger.
Oh, wonderful. So
possibly even hanging from a cliff.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Jerk. So anyway, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, what the fucks, anything at all, maybe. Email, Twitter, on the blog, on YouTube, and actually I need to check and see if we've got any comments on the episodes. I'm really bad at this sometimes, I'll fully admit. I apologize. And of course on Facebook. So season finale of season 5 will be hopefully next week. We'll try to let you know if we have to delay a week or so to get things ready, but do you really think you can be ready in a week, Howard?
God, yes. And we need to do it soon because,
Yeah. So, alrighty. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Hopefully you'll join us next week for the season finale. I have been your GM Byron.
I've been your co-host Howard.
And just remember the motto of Ropai Gamma is roll high, play well, die hard.